Welcome back to the Shuffle Squad. Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be covering over the top 10 best post-rotation decks from Journey Together. It's no surprise to many that we are switching from our current format to Scarlet and Violet on pretty soon. I see a lot of YouTube comments. People are like, hey, this deck's about to be rotated. What if I only covered the new rotation decks? We're covering the post-rotation format in this video, showcasing the early format from Journey Together. All of the lists are available in the pinned comment. You can copy and paste them right into your My Limitless deck builder. If you try to put them into live, the cards aren't available, or if you try to put them into live after Journey Together comes out, they might not necessarily be the same code as it is from the Japanese version to the English version. Either way, I'm gonna hit you up with the top 10 best decks that I've discovered in the Journey Together format. If that sounds like a plan, give this video a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which decks you're the most excited for in post-rotation. Let's jump into it. Kicking off our list is Zoroark EX. I think this has the makings of a great deck, but sometimes it falls a little bit short. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of tough to place deck number 10 because there's so many decks that I've created, built, tested, and I had to give it up to our boy Zoroark EX. Being able to use trade, very similar to Kirlia's refinement from last format, pitching cards away, and then copying different Pokemon is fantastic. In this case, we're copying the Darmanitan or the Reshiram to either snipe our opponent's Pokemon or to do a lot of damage if they were to damage our Pokemon. Being able to do extra damage with Defiance Band and Binding Mochi, being able to power up your Pokemon with the unfortunately named PP Up, and making sure that your Pokemon have free retreat with Castle gives you a lot of really cool options when it comes to playing this deck. I think this is a solid build to start off. I've actually gone through all of these decks with the help of my teammate King Dre Clouts, and we've gone through, updated all these decks, so I appreciate his help, and of course I appreciate the translations available from Justin Basil's website, and I'll put the link available in our description so you can see what some of these cards do if you don't necessarily know what the new cards from Journey Together do. Overall, I think that this is a type of deck that's probably going to grow, especially if we get some more Pokemon. If we don't get more Pokemon, it might just stay just a deck that exists, but we see how decks like Goldango in our Prismatic Evolutions format can sometimes rise all the way to the top. All of our lists are going to be in the pinned comments, and if you need any of the cards for these decks, check out our sponsors at Kayfabe Cards and PTCGO Store, and you can always get your physical cards or your online code cards to play Pokemon however you like. Let's jump into our number 9 deck. At number 9, we have our Chaladon EX with Dubwool. I think that this deck is really well polished, and you'll see a lot of these decks are for the current metagame, and as the metagame is developing, we have cards like Zacian EX or Hop Zacian EX, because we're able to get through things like Cornerstone Ogerpon. It doesn't have any abilities, and of course we can get the knockout. Otherwise, we can't get the knockouts. There is a Zacian EX Probo that's coming out in May. That's probably better because it takes only 3 energies, but this does get the auto knockout on something like Cornerstone. Otherwise, our Chaladon's just accelerating energies, using Metal Defender, attacking. Double allows you to bring things up, and otherwise it's a very similar list to what we've seen before. We have Max Belt to hit some different numbers that we previously couldn't have hit, and that's really it. It's certainly a basic deck in this format, but basic doesn't not necessarily mean it's ineffective. With other decks going down compared to last format, our Chaladon EX remains in the top 10, and we might even see this deck rise like the skyscraper bridge kind of thing it is. I know, probably a bad pun, but you're watching the top 10 best post-rotation deck video. There's a lot of really good information here for free, so I appreciate y'all for putting up with me. Let's jump into number 8. At number 8, we have Gardevoir EX without Refinement Kirlia. This deck is kind of taken on a new shell because Refinement Kirlia has rotated away, and we have to deal with the other one, or the only one that exists. Maybe when we get the Mega Gardevoir EX set, we'll get a more playable Kirlia. I don't think we've seen the leaks for that. If we do, let me know in the comments below. Other than that, we're going with a rare candy build because we don't care about refinement as much, so Gardevoir is going to be a little bit quicker. We have cards like Research, Arvin to make sure that we have the deck moving, and we get new toys to play with like Lily's Clefairy EX, allowing us to take some one-shot potential on Dragapult's EX and other Dragon-type Pokemon that might pop up. Brilliant Blender doesn't necessarily seem like it's going to fit into a deck like this at first, but you got to remind yourself, without Radiant Greninja and without Refinement Curlia, how the heck are you discarding these energies? Well, Brilliant Blender seems to be the best option right now. So that's what we're going to be cooking with. I think Gardevoir, it's one of those decks where we're going to see how well positioned it is. But this is what a modern Gardevoir list looks like in 2025 post-rotation. You saw it here first. Maybe not first, but we got it. It's here. It exists. Let's see what we got going on at number 7. At number 7, we have Raging Bolt EX with the Noctowl engine. And similarly, to get through things like Cornerstone, we play a Cornerstone ourselves and Crispin, so we're able to get through other Cornerstones. You might be like, whoa, it has an ability, Zach. Well, its attack goes through everything. So sometimes Cornerstone's going to be your best answer against things like Cornerstone, Mimikyu, or these handful of wall decks that just seem to exist in our format for some reason or another. We went with a Noctowl build because we lost Pokestop, and the Noctowl build's going to allow us to have that turn 1 start with Fan Rotom, get everything set up, and we can even use Ditto on our first turn, free retreat into it with Latias, get out Raging Bolt, use Professor Sada's Vitality, and attack. I think this deck has all the makings of a tier 1 deck, like most of the other decks on this list, and it just works. It's Raging Bolt at its finest. And are we going to see other builds of Raging Bolt come out? Honestly, unsure. But I do think that this is a hot deck when it comes to everything put together. So I think we'll see a lot of people really pick this one up. Might be actually one of the most popular decks in the format as we approach Atlanta regionals and Monterey regionals. Let's see what we got going on at number 6. At number 6, we have one of the peskiest decks available in our format, the deck that actually won the recent Champions League, Feraligatr, with some wall cards. So you might be like, how exactly does this deck work? Well, you're able to use annoying attacks on both Croconaw and Totodile, where Croconaw can do a hit and run, maybe with some extra damage with Torrential Hearts, and move itself to the bench and send up something like Milotic, or send up something like Mimikyu, or even just sacrificing a simple free retreater like Badoo. This gives us a lot of opportunities to just kind of hit, switch, or we can just pivot into an attacker or a different thing, whatever we want, whenever our opponent just can't attack it. Like if they don't have an answer to a Terra Pokemon or to Milotic EX and we're playing against a Terra deck, we're just going to set up a couple Milotic EX, slowly build up energies, and just be prepared to attack. Totodile can stop your opponent from retreating. Feraligatr can do extra damage and also allow you to get damage in play to use Monkey Dory. There's a lot of really cool things when it comes down to this list. It's a little inconsistent at times, and I think it might be placed a little bit high because it did very well at the beginning of the format, and now it's not seeing as much success. But I do gotta give our flowers while Feraligatr can still smell them. With our first post rotation, it'd be hard not to put the deck that won the 5,000 player Champions League in the top 10. So right now we have Feraligatr at number 6. Check out this list, it is sick. At number 5, we have Charizard EX with the Noctowl package. I took this deck from the Japanese Champions League, think it does pretty well into the metagame, and of course, we've added in a Gouging Fire EX, so we have ways to get around things like Cornerstone, Ogerpon, and of course, we have ways to get around Milotic. We have that Max Belt or Dusclops, Dusknoir to get the right numbers, and this deck just kind of cooks. It's Charizard in 2025, something that you don't really see all the time, but Charizard is largely back, and I think it's a really exciting deck for people to kind of play around with. It's debatable if this version or the Pidgeot EX version's better, but right now it seems like we're leaning towards the version with Noctowl, and that's what people are just generally playing. So we're gonna go with this version. The reason why we're playing Noctowl is because we can go with a large bench. We have a variety of different attackers. We can search out whatever we want, and the deck is it's got some options. If we run into, let's say, a Badoo and our opponent's just locking us, we can still attack with Terapagos. Other Charizard variants have to go with a Technical Machine Evolution or a Grand Tree build to at least get around item lock. We don't necessarily have to do that because we have other attackers that we can deal with. Even though it might not be the best, this seems to be a solid way to be playing the deck. And I think it's kind of where everything kind of takes a pause. Everything after this, I think the top 4 are just the best decks. I think everything below this is fine and acceptable, and they're really good decks to kind of experiment with. Top 4 is just the top 4 best decks in the format right now. At least if I was playing in Atlanta tomorrow, I'd be probably playing a deck from the top 4. Let's jump into it. At number 4, we have Goldango EX. Now, Goldango is one of those decks that's absolutely done fantastic in our pre-rotation format. So what if our format was similar enough and we just took the cards that rotated out and updated this deck? Nothing too crazy gets added into this deck. We get Lavencia. The stadium allows us to get back 2 lightning energies from our discard pile each turn, so it's going to make it rain a little bit easier. And then of course we're taking the technology of the single prizer Goldango that Lucas Singh played to Vancouver Regionals and adding it in here. We don't really lose too much else, so I've just kind of adjusted the deck to cut out the Pokestop, added in the new stadium, and made it as consistent as possible. There's a bunch of different Dango builds that we've seen with Dunsparce, or Dunsparce, Scizor, and even Dragapult EX. I think just playing it plain Jane is probably going to be better right now, but I'm always open up for suggestions, so we'll see exactly how this deck performs in our early post-rotation format of Journey Together. Let's see what we got cooking at number 3. At number 3, we have the Milotic EX Wall Stall deck that was arguably one of the most successful decks at the Japanese Champions League that we saw not that long ago. Being able to block your opponent's Terra Pokemon from doing attacks and damage to your Pokemon, Frigoraph blocking basic Pokemon EX, and Cornerstone EX blocking your opponent's Pokemon that have abilities really gives us kind of this trifecta of blocking. I kind of took a list that did very well in a City League, decided that Pokevital A is better than Scoop Up Cyclone, and I think that there's just a lot of things here that cook. And it's really one of those things where the deck just came together. You ever just look at a list and you're like, hey, this is probably close to the list? I've seen a lot of versions of this deck, decks that are trying to add in Iron Thorns, decks that are trying to add in Mimikyu, decks that are trying to add in Noivern. This one just came together naturally, and I think all the little things like Super Rod, the Pokevital A, the Rigid Band, the Town Stores, the Chorus's Tenacity, all these things just kind of work together to make a really healthy wall deck for the format. Sure, there's gonna be some answers. I think this video, a lot of decks had answers to this deck, because I mean, we've already featured 2 decks with Milotic. And maybe there's more, maybe there's not, right? But it's one of those things where as the format decides how this deck is positioned, this deck is always going to exist, and it can always pivot around and build around the format. So I think this is a solid build of Milotic Wall Stall if you're looking for a cool way to play the deck. Otherwise, we got a couple more decks that are awesome to come. So let's jump into our number 2 deck. At number 2, we have Teal Mask Ogerpon EX in the Terra Box deck. Now, this is the deck that Tord played to the Champions League in Japan, and there was a handful of other people. It's kind of where the deck truly got unveiled to the world. Maybe it was played a little bit before then, but this is really where the deck kind of made it. Arguably one of, if not the most successful decks in Japan right now. I think many players are excited to get their hands on this new archetype. The list is very similar to what Tord ran. The only differences are I cut an Area 0 for a Super Rod, I cut Terapagos for a Cornerstone Ogerpon, and I cut a Psychic Energy for a Fighting Energy, giving this deck a lot of options in the current metagame that it just didn't have before. And I think going from all these different Terra Pokemon, Sparkling Crystal, Crispin, powering them up, moving energies around, it's kind of like if Regidrago was kind of reborn in a lot of ways. Instead of just going with one Pokemon, we're going with a lot of these different Pokemon, and knowing which Pokemon to use against which deck can certainly be huge. This deck could have easily been number 1. It was really close. I know that Dre and I sat there for like 30 minutes being like, which deck is number 1, y'all? But there's only one number 1 deck, so if you haven't guessed it, put it in the comments below. Let's jump into it. The number 1 deck of the week is Dragapult EX with Dust Noir. We take the number one deck from last format. It doesn't lose much, and it's now the number one deck of this format. Seems pretty familiar from previous formats, and there's a few things that we could update this deck with. I've seen some lists that play Blood Moon, Ursaluna, and I'm a little bit worried if you just get stuck within the active spot. There's other builds that don't play it, and right now we're going with a list that doesn't play it. If you're playing Blood Moon, definitely add a Defiance so you're able to take down some of the Terra Pokemon. Just decided to go without an answer with this list because maybe wall stall decks are going to fall off. I had to go with some deck to give a controversial opinion with, right? I do think that Drayton is better than most people think because you're able to, at the beginning of the game, search out a Pokemon and maybe a Buddy Buddy Poppin', or in the middle of the game, you're able to get Rare Candy and Dust Noir. So I definitely have to thank my friends Dario and Jay for basically showing me Drayton when we played Charizard to Dunsparce maybe a few months ago, and really looking towards a post-rotation format. The card seems like it's going to be like the next Arven, so I recommend picking up that card now before you're stuck paying $4 or $5 or even more per copy, because not every single person has them right now, and the way that Pokemon cards are selling out, it's a hard card to acquire. Dragapult Dust Noir being able to spread damage counters wherever you want just seems to work, and I think this list pretty close to nailing it as a solid version of the deck right off the hop, and it's our number one deck of the week. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below. Let's argue or let's become friends. Let me close things out. I appreciate all y'all watching this video, and I should note that I'm going to be switching over to a majority of post-rotation content starting now. Our Prismatic Evolutions format's become a little bit stale, and that's one of those things where people aren't really viewing the content. I really want to provide the content that I want to create and the content that people want to view. If you're still playing in the post-rotation or in the pre-rotation formats, that's great. I'd recommend watching our videos from that format because not too much is going to be really changing from the results of Vancouver Regionals. So as we kind of update and see exactly what's going on with our post-rotation format, I don't think many are really testing our pre-rotation format. So that's going to mean that the format's going to stay a little bit stagnant. We're going to see a lot of Dragapult, Dust Noir, Goldango, some Gardevoirs, maybe some Lugias, stuff like that. And as always, be sure to give every video a like, subscribe to the channel. Every single comment does help boost the YouTube algorithm, so those are much appreciated. And if you're ever trying to improve your game, hit me up for some coaching at metafy.gg/@ZachLassage. I also have my new Metafy group there, so you can get access to all of my deck lists, including those outside of the top 10, early guides, premium content, and more. I'll catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes.
Tabi no hajimari wa tsune ni michi e no ippo de aru. Sore wa yami e to tsuzuku. 初めの一歩を踏み出すには勇気がいる。そして旅の終わりには旅を始めた時の自分とは別人になっているかもしれない。旅に出よう。物語の次の章がお主を待っている。将軍の道を歩め。侍の箱とともに。アルティメットガードが送る冒険の第一章。刀将軍の道近日発売。
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed the content that we have today, and maybe you'll click on one of these other videos, enjoy those videos too. If you haven't already, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments what video you want to watch next. Until next time, we'll catch up with all y'all later. Have yourself a great day.